मतलब सीटें घोषित की है, ये अच्छा नहीं है।
सबसे पहले तो उन्होंने कांग्रेस पक्ष की तरफ से नहीं रखा, उन्होंने अपनी पर्सनल राय रखी है, क्योंकि उनको एक कैंडिडेट जो था, एक उनका जो पिछला चुनाव हुआ था उसमें वो हार चुके हैं शिवसेना से, और ये हमारे लिए विनिंग सीट थी, तो हमने कैंडिडेट डिक्लेयर किया है, तो उसकी नाराजगी उन्होंने व्यक्त की। अब अमोल जी पे आरोप लगाए जा रहे हैं, क्योंकि ये जानते हैं कि ये हारे हुए हैं, ये इनको हराना भारतीय जनता पार्टी को मुश्किल होगा, अमोल कीर्तिकर जी को, इसलिए वो अनर्गल बयानबाजी कर रहे हैं। दुखद है, उम्मीद करती हूँ कि वो समझेंगे कि अलायंस धर्म जो होता है उसमें कहीं कॉम्प्रोमाइज करना जरूरी है।
Good evening. This is Brass Taxam Zaka Jacob. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has been sent to further ED custody till the 1st of April. Now, today's debate is not about the merits or demerits of the case against Mr. Kejriwal. That, of course, is a matter that's going to be settled by the courts. But the US State Department has, not once, but now on 2 occasions, responded to Kejriwal's arrest by saying that it hopes that the due legal process is followed. Now, you could argue many things against the Modi government. Certainly the argument that they use ED, IT, CBI, etc. disproportionately against the opposition. That is an argument that does hold water. But to say that India's judiciary is compromised, which was the implication of the statement from the US State Department spokesperson, that is something that is deeply contentious. Isn't that statement by the US State Department akin to saying that India's judiciary is hand in glove with the executive? It's hand in glove with the state. After all, India has never said that the US, for example, should ensure due legal processes are met in Donald Trump's many legal cases. And of course, many Republican supporters, many Donald Trump supporters, MAGA aficionados, if you will, they feel that many of the cases against Donald Trump are trumped up and they are foisted on him by the Biden administration. But India has never ever said a word against these cases. After all, these are internal matters of respective states. So has the United States State Department overreached and crossed that line of non-interference in internal matters of friends and allies by commenting not once but twice on what is clearly an internal matter here in India?
Kejriwal. Congress Party's allegations that tax authorities have frozen some of their bank accounts in a manner that will make it challenging to effectively campaign in the upcoming elections, and we encourage fair, transparent, and timely legal processes for each of these issues.
ईडी खुद ही कह रही है कि इतने दिनों की रिमांड के अंदर उन्हें कोई जानकारी नहीं मिली। एक चुने हुए मुख्यमंत्री को आप कितने दिनों तक जो है इस तरीके से कैद कर सकते हैं?
मानवीय भावनाओं को दबाया जा रहा हो और तानाशाही तरीके से दबाया जा रहा हो, तो ऐसे स्थिति में स्वाभाविक है कि जो मानवतावादी विचारधारा है वो निश्चित रूप से कहीं न कहीं व्यक्त करने का उनको दायित्व है।
The recent remarks by the State Department are unwarranted. Any such external imputation on our electoral and legal processes is completely unacceptable.
All right, so is this an overreach by the US State Department? After all, why should they be commenting on something that is the internal matter of India? Tuhin Sinha is national spokesperson of the BJP. Jasmine Shah is spokesperson of the Aam Aadmi Party. He'll be joining us. Kanwal Sibal is former foreign secretary. Michael Kugelman is director of the South Asia Institute at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington. Before I go to the political spokespersons, Kanwal Sibal, let me start with you first. As somebody who's been a career diplomat, is this an overreach by the US State Department, or are they just laying down what is a basic guideline, a basic principle that there should be fair, open, transparent, and timely legal processes for everyone, including those in the opposition?
Well, the question is that has the United States made such statements before in the case of other instances where the opposition may have been targeted? They haven't. Now, after Germany said something on Kejriwal's arrest, which was unacceptable, we had a very strong reaction. United States knew we had reacted, but nevertheless, knowing that, it waded into the issue and issued their own statement in a bid to support their German ally. Now, when the United States called in a senior diplomat from the US Embassy to protest, United States spokesperson of the State Department has doubled down. And this time not only mentioned Kejriwal, but brought in the issue of the closure of the bank accounts of the Congress.
Yeah.
Now, it is very clear that they are supporting the opposition in India, because Kejriwal and Congress are both in opposition just before the elections in India. So they are not they're interfering not only in the judicial process, but they are interfering in the political process and in the electoral process in favor of the opposition. Now, I am at a great loss to understand how it serves their interests or the interests of both sides in terms of the kind of relationship that we are building up and which is proceeding on other fronts very well. I think the desire also is to cast a shadow on Modi's re-election, because it is almost a given that he'll get re-elected. Actually, this should have been a deterrent. In normal diplomacy, when you know a leader is going to win the election, you do not try and say something which actually would upset the new leadership. But here, I think they want to cast an aspersion on his electoral success by strengthening this kind of narrative. That,
but why? What do they
backsliding.
gain? Because after all, the US and India are strategic partners. Everybody knows, I mean, the US needs India to counterweight China. India needs the United States for projection of power, if you will. I mean, it's a relationship that for the next 25 years is going to be mutually beneficial. Why would the United States go out on a limb to say what the State Department spokesperson has said?
I think there is unhappiness at the kind of success that the BJP forces have achieved in India. And they have a tradition of, pushed by their own domestic lobbies in the Congress, but much more in the media and the think tanks, that there is democratic backsliding in India. And after the arrest of Kejriwal and the issue of the Congress bank accounts, they feel that they have a ground to make their comments. It is totally unwarranted. Why are they... Now, as you rightly said, I mean, India could come back and talk about Trump and the politicization of the US judiciary, which is highly political in nature. Their judges are actually politically selected at lower levels and politically appointed at the highest level of the Supreme Court. Now, if we start reacting and get into these polemics, how does it serve our bilateral interest?
Okay.
We are not interested in commenting on their local judicial processes, and they should spare us these homilies on what they think is happening in India.
Sure.
It doesn't serve
Spare us the homilies.
That's
That's the phrase used by Kanwal Sibal. Yasmin Shah of the Aam Aadmi Party is joining us. Leave alone the internal politics and India not commenting on what's happening in the United States, and therefore the same thing should apply to India, the US, or any country for that matter, Germany, any other country, should not be commenting on what is clearly internal affairs here in India. Yasmin Shah, the contention is this, that ultimately no one, you can say 100 things are wrong with the Modi government, right? And maybe there is merit in the argument that, IT, ED, CBI, etc. are being used disproportionately against the opposition. But no one in their right mind, internally here in India or externally, will say that our judiciary is compromised. I don't think anyone, even the political opposition, has made that charge against the Modi government, that the judiciary is hand in glove with the Modi government. The implication of what the US State Department spokesperson has said is that Modi government and the judiciary are in bed with each other. That is not the case. That's not an argument that can be made against the Modi government by even its worst critics. I mean, the fact that India's electoral democracy is participative, we have turnouts of 60, 65%, even 70% sometimes, is not something that can be questioned.
So first of all, Zaka, let me make it very clear that as Aam Aadmi Party, we do not welcome any such remarks or retorts from external governments on processes and due affairs of our country. Okay, that is very clear. Now, having said that, let's look at who are these countries who are making such comments. These are friendly countries. These are allies of India. Few months back, it was Mr. Modi who went to America and proclaimed that today our relationship is stronger than ever. Of course, he was received very warmly there. He addressed the joint Congress session and all of that. So today, more than any opposition party, it is the BJP that must answer as to why is it that India's perception is plummeting internationally. This is just one signal. There are other signals. You see the coverage in international media, and not just one. It's very easy to villainize one particular media house. But if you look at the trajectory of be it international ratings, be it look at international coverage, all of that. So, it is something that Mr. Modi and his government should answer as to why is it that people, abroad find it comfortable today passing remarks.
No, but they are saying that those folks have biases. They have some kind of tinted glasses. They're not looking at India the way that Indians here are looking at because Indians are giving time after time, every term after term, renewed mandate to Mr. Modi. So their contention is these guys, whether it's New York Times, Washington Post, ratings agencies, VDem, you name it, are all biased. That's the contention by the BJP.
Okay, Zaka. So I think let me then come to the question that the BJP owes to the people of the country. Okay. Today, if you ask 10 people on the streets, are ED and CBI departments of the Bharatiya Janata Party, do they take their orders from the headquarters of Bharatiya Janata Party or from, ED headquarters or CBI?
Okay.
9 out of 10 people are very comfortably going to state that the ED and CBI today are only demonizing and trying to finish off the opposition. And a very simple example, Zaka, if the BJP spokesperson here can answer this, then probably it will reveal what their thinking is. A completely trumped up fake liquor scam is concocted. For 2 years, investigations go on, 500 raids, no recovery, no solid evidence, only statements of government approvers. And you put the entire top 4 leaders of an entire national party in jail in a matter where investigation is not even concluded. Forget trial and forget conviction. Now, are there parallels of anything like this anywhere in the world? If BJP is aware about it, please tell us.
Okay.
But there is something remarkable happening that more than international, I think, questions of people in India are unanswered, and especially people like Sharad Chandra Reddy, on whose statement you imprison a sitting chief minister. Never happened in Indian history. Sharad Chandra Reddy, who becomes an approver, is now found to be one of the big BJP donors.
Okay.
You put him behind jail, you extract a statement. And then you take money from him. I mean, what is going on in this country?
Let Tuhin respond. Tuhin, forget about everything else. There is a basic perception that agencies like IT, CBI, ED are being used. Not just perception, it's a fact. It's a matter of fact. Newspapers have done stories about this. That agencies like IT, CBI, ED are being used disproportionately against the opposition. The ED, for example, 95% of the cases that the ED has filed, the raids it's undertaken, are against opposition leaders. This is a contention that you have to address, that the BJP government has to address. And secondly, the implication of what the US State Department spokesperson has said is that by doing this in the eve of elections, this investigation, for example, in the Liquor Gate has been going on for the last 2 years. In the Congress Party's IT case, it's been going on since 94-95. To do this on the eve of the 2024 elections, you are making the playing field uneven. That's the contention. Please respond on both. Tuhin.
Well, good evening. Good evening, Zaka. Good evening, everybody. I think the US and the world needs to realize that India's sovereignty is non-negotiable. And it is non-negotiable because we have a competent government. We have institutions which are robust, which includes the judiciary, which includes the executive, which includes the legislature. So in this situation, instead of unequivocally condemning this interference by an old ally and a traditional partner, I don't think the opposition is only insinuating further is only insinuating foul play. The fact is that, while we respect US as an ally, US is one of our strongest allies at this point of time, the interference per se is not appreciated. But why do they think they can dare to interfere? Because of the constant insinuation by parties like the Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party. In fact, I have to put this over here, that yesterday the Delhi High Court had cautioned the legal cell of the Aam Aadmi Party not to protest against the judiciary in the case of Arvind Kejriwal. In the case of Congress Party, Rahul Gandhi has been travelling abroad and constantly bad-mouthing and vilifying India's democracy, constantly questioning India's institutions. So when the opposition of this country behaves irresponsibly, when they constantly, besmirch India's reputation abroad, that is where
they are the opposition. That's their job. What else do you expect them to do? The opposition's job is to besmirch you guys. That is their reason to exist.
I am talking about the institutions. I am talking about legal institutions. They have every right to criticize us, the BJP. They have every right to criticize the Prime Minister. But when they go abroad and constantly cast aspersions on the judiciary and on the work functioning of the democracy, that is where some over-enthusiastic lobbies and elements within the US administration get the cue that it is okay to comment on India's affairs. And I want to put this on record. Somewhere 15 years ago in the Congress regime, it was a done thing to involve the US in everything. Every time there was a bomb blast, they would go to the US complaining. Now that is not appreciated. We have abrogated Article 370 without any intervention from abroad. I think this change needs to be accepted by the world. We had weak governments of the Congress in the past where it was a done thing to encourage remarks from abroad, to encourage participation in India's internal affairs. Now it is not, and I think the opposition also needs to be on the same page on this.
Let me ask Michael Kugelman. There are two parts to my question, Michael. One, as Ambassador Sibal said, all opinion polls are suggesting that Mr. Modi will get a third term. The only question is the margin of his victory. Why would the United States go out of its way, not once but twice now the US State Department has responded to this, going out of its way to upset an ally, to upset a ruling party or ruling government, which is most likely going to come back to power, number one, at this time and stage. And number two, in diplomacy, there is the principle of reciprocity. If the Indian Foreign Ministry spokesperson tomorrow were to make a comment saying, some of these cases against Donald Trump, we feel are trumped up, and many in the Republican Party feel that. They feel that most of these cases will not stand the test of law. So if they start echoing that, how would America appreciate that?
So thanks for having me. I think that to the first point, it would have been better had this comment by the State Department official not been made. But I do think that there's been a bit of an overreaction here. I see this as a fairly anodyne comment. It was made in response to a query from a journalist. That's how this all started. It's not an articulation of a formal position or policy. It's simply saying that the U.S. hopes there'll be a free and fair trial. I would argue that the U.S. government, as part of what it describes as its values-based foreign policy, it comments a lot more about domestic and internal issues in other countries than it does in India. I mean, as you'll recall, this caused some tensions in the U.S. relationship with Bangladesh when it was relentlessly bringing attention to concerns about the election in Bangladesh. This is relatively unusual when it comes to what the U.S. says about India. The U.S. is not favoring anyone. It's not favoring the Indian opposition. It's not trying to undermine Modi or the BJP. And I would argue that here in Washington, there's been a view that the relationship with India has grown by leaps and bounds over this decade, this near decade that Modi and BJP have been in power in India. I think that this, at the end of the day, highlights a conversation that's been going on for quite some time about the notion of values versus interest in the relationship with India. There are many, including myself, that think it's better that the U.S. pursue public messaging that focuses on shared interests with India, as opposed to shared values, because when it gets to shared values, that's when there may be temptations on the part of a U.S. official to bring attention to something related to rights or democracy.
Michael, sorry I'm interrupting. Before you go to the second part of your answer, You brought in the Bangladesh example. I can even bring in the Pakistan example. And you're a scholar of Pakistan. Again, the US State Department said stuff about the Pakistan elections right after it. No one can make a comparison of elections in Pakistan or even for that matter in Bangladesh to elections in India. You can say, like I said, 100 things that are wrong with the Modi government, but no one would say that elections in India are rigged. I don't think I've heard that allegation even from the opposition for the last 20 years.
No, this is a fair point, and I go back to what I said that it would have been better if the U.S. had simply not made this comment, but it's been made, and I think it's been an overreaction in terms of the response. But so be it. But to your point, had India complained or expressed concerns about something happening in the United States, honestly, I imagine that the U.S. government probably would have ignored that type of comment. Or at least the administration would have ignored it. And that gets me to another point that I was going to make. What is lost if India had simply ignored this comment coming from the State Department, right? Why would one want to dignify it with a response? Now, one could argue that maybe it's important to respond in order to deter the U.S. from making similar comments in the future. Well, there have been a few cases where the U.S. has made such comments. And the India had responded to the initial comment, and then the U.S. has essentially doubled down on what it said initially. So, is there something to be said? I put this before you. Is there something to be said for India simply deciding to not respond and ignore it and just not dignify that type of comment with a response?
Mr. Sibal, you want to respond to that? Michael Kugelman's position is that had India just chosen not to respond, maybe this would have been a storm in a teacup and it would have blown over.
Come on. This is a ridiculous argument. America is so sensitive about interfering in the political processes. They sanctioned Russia for interference in their electoral politics. They are very intolerant of that. But I think it's all right if they interfere in the politics of India, number one. Number two, it's not as if this was an anodyne comment which was made just like that without any background. Germany had made a very elaborate comment castigating what was happening, and the State Department knows what our reaction was, but they didn't take that into account. And in response to a email message, they showed their eagerness to say something to back their German ally. And then when India reacted by summoning the U.S. senior official, as I mentioned, they've doubled down and increased widened their interference by also bringing in the Congress. Why do they want to do that? And so far as values-based diplomacy is concerned, I mean, it is grating. I mean, this suggests that India has no values and only the United States incorporates the values, that we don't have a values-based policy. I mean, this is very patronizing. To bring in an argument like this, as if they have the right, because of a values-based policy, to castigate everybody else. We have a values-based policy, but we do not want to interfere in the internal relations, internal affairs of other countries, especially the United States, because we are on a very strong wicket with the United States. It doesn't help our overall policy to actually get into polemics with the United States. We have larger interests, and we don't want to compromise them by actually raising such issues to a level where it begins to affect the overall relationship. So the United States must show restraint on their side and not openly. Now, the argument that this doesn't mean they're siding with the opposition, of course, this is a false argument. Of course, they're siding with the opposition because they clearly say that this will hamper Congress from doing its electioneering because the funds have been blocked. And in the case of Kejriwal, it's quite clear why they're doing that. With regard to a fair and whatever else they said, what is the presumption? Presumption is that there will not be, or there's doubt about a fair and transparent process, legal process. This is what the assumption is. But why, on what basis are they making this assumption?
No, I would add, maybe not a comparable example, but when you're bringing in this whole dimension of values-based diplomacy, where is values-based diplomacy when 30,000 people have died in Gaza? Like I said, it may not be a comparable example, but clearly the Biden administration either is helpless about it or simply doesn't think that values-based diplomacy applies in this case. But be that as it may, that's a different debate. But let me come back to Jasmine Shah and to Tuhin Sinha. Jasmine Shah, the contention is this. forget about what the US has said or what Germany has said. Courts of law have gone into the matter of the Liquorgate scandal, including, forget about Mr. Kejriwal, he's just been arrested, a week or so back. But even in the case of Mr. Sisodia and others who've been arrested in this case, even bail has been denied. Now, you could argue it's because of PMLA, the amendments brought forth for PMLA. But courts of law have gone into great detail into these cases, and without commenting on, whether ultimately these people are guilty or not, they have said that prima facie a case is made out. And no one, not even the Aam Aadmi Party, has questioned the judiciary. For example, the Supreme Court, no less, in Manish Sisodia's case, has gone into it and said prima facie the ED has a case.
Zaka, you are right. So far, the courts have denied bail to any of the Aam Aadmi Party leaders. And the reasons behind that is very important for your viewers to understand. PMLA, the entire Law Prevention of Money Laundering Act, was created to catch people in narcotics and terrorists. And that is the reason the kinds of clauses and the entire jurisprudence is inverted. Typically in law, you are innocent until you're proven guilty. But under PMLA, because the idea is that you're going to go after terrorists, if you are even accused, you are considered guilty until you finish the trial and prove yourself to be innocent. Now, what has been the track record of the Modi government in the last 10 years? Zaka, name one terrorist or one mega drug smuggler who has been caught under PMLA. Zero. But how many politicians have you caught? Dozens and dozens and dozens. And what is happening with these politicians? Zaka, if it was such an open and shut case, for 2 years investigation is going on, not a single rupee recovered. You have not even finished investigating. People like Mr. Sisodia, one of the senior most people in a national party, are languishing in jail for over a year. Trial has not even started. Where are the parallels in the world of this kind of a lopsided process? Okay. And the courts, the hands of the courts are tied. Zaka, I'll just finish. The hands of the courts are tied because it's the law of the land. We are not saying PML is not the law of the land. But when the law gets weaponized by the ruling party, somewhere it seems that courts are also finding it difficult. But the Supreme Court did say that if this matter goes to trial, this will not even stand 2 minutes. Zaka, I think you'll remember that. This was the court of Justice Sanjeev Khanna and says that you have no evidence. You have this with the current evidence, this matter will not stand trial. But since you have the power to keep the person arrested until the trial starts, so be it. And that is what we are paying the price for.
So, Tuin, I'll give you the final word. The point is, and this is what the opposition has been saying, forget about what the US has said or what Germany has said. The opposition has been saying that you look at the Modi government's track record, the use of agencies like the IT, ED, CBI, etc. The ED, for example, there have been 121 cases, either cases or raids or questioning of leaders that have happened, political entities, political individuals who've been raided or questioned in the last 10 years, of which 115 are from the opposition. And look at the number of convictions. 4 convictions have happened in the last 10 years in ED cases. The contention of the opposition is you are taking advantage of a law. The amendment to the law, by the way, was made in 2017-18 by the Modi government. You are taking advantage of the law to tarnish the image of everyone in the opposition. And none of this is actually resulting eventually in a conviction, or less than 5% is resulting in a conviction. You are just using the law. The process is the punishment to tarnish everyone that, look, everybody in the opposition is corrupt.
Well, Zaka, when a crime is committed under the ambit of the new PMLA Act, obviously the people will be tried under that. Now, I think the Aam Aadmi Party needs to introspect that, a law which was actually meant to curb and curtail terror funding, why were they perpetrating crimes which fall under its ambit? This is the same party which 12 years ago had come to the scene to clean politics, and now obviously there are multiple cases of money laundering and crimes related to that. As far as the Congress is concerned, last week they convened a press conference to actually besmirch the courts and make charges like the entire funds are frozen, which is far from reality. There is only a certain amount, and instead of using the words frozen, the right word is lien. The entire account is under lien. So if this is how the Congress party spreads scanners, if this is how they spread misinformation about the courts, like I mentioned, there are woke elements, there are over-enthusiastic lobbies within the US which are waiting to take advantage of it. So I don't entirely blame them. While it is unfortunate, I think the opposition needs to introspect. If ED in most of the cases has gone against the opposition. It is also because in the last 10 years at least, the BJP under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi in all the state governments has followed a very focused, work-driven agenda and kept corruption in abeyance.
Okay.
There are actually very little or barely any instance of corruption against the BJP leaders because of a certain work culture which we have believed in, which unfortunately the opposition could not
that's a debate for
imbibe.
another day. In fact, we've done that on numerous occasions here on Brass Tacks, but we'll leave it at that. For the moment, thank you very much to all our guests for joining us. Let's see. But like I said, I'm very clear in my position tonight that the United States has clearly overreached. The State Department is clearly overreached by saying that India should extend the due process of law, and it should be justice in a timely fashion, so on and so forth. Come on. Like I said, that's not an allegation that even the opposition here in India is making against India's judiciary, that they are somehow compromised or they are hand in glove with the Modi government. Ultimately, of course, are there criticisms that can be made about the process itself? The process takes far too long. Yes, that is a valid criticism. But to say that just because somebody is from the opposition, he or she will not be extended the due process of law, that is an unfair criticism, and clearly in this instance it is an overreach. Let's now move on to the other big domestic political story in Maharashtra, where Chief Minister Eknath Shinde has declared the first list of 8 candidates for the Shinde Sena in the Lok Sabha polls, renominating most of the candidates who were elected in 2019. This was, of course, in the undivided Shiv Sena. The one difference is the ticket that's been given to former Congress MLA Raju Parve from the Ramtek seat. Parve joined the Shiv Sena recently. He's replaced Sena's sitting MP Krupal Tumane. Talks are underway in the NDA for other seats as well, with the alliance parties trying to iron out the differences, primarily in Nashik, in Amravati, in South Mumbai and in Satara. Meanwhile, Bollywood actor Govinda, who was a former MP, he's now made a political comeback. He's joined the ruling Shiv Sena, the Shinde Sena, in presence of Eknath Shinde. There is, of course, a lot of chatter that he will be getting the Mumbai Northwest seat. That was his old seat. The knives are out in the Mahavikas Aghadi as well. The Uddhav Thackeray-led Shiv Sena's decision to announce its first list has turned into a flashpoint. The Congress is now objecting to claims in 3 key seats in Mumbai, as well as, of course, in Sangli and in Bhiwandi, which, according to the Congress, was still under discussion, but the Thackeray Sena went ahead and named those seats. Now, let me show this to you on the magic wall as to what these contentious seats are. Remember, this is a problem for both alliances. It's not just the Aghadi, but also for the NDA. So what are these problem seats in Maharashtra? Remember, Maharashtra is an important state. It's 48 seats. It's the second biggest state in India after Uttar Pradesh in terms of the number of seats. So for the NDA alliance, these are the tricky seats where there is still a bone of contention between the various alliance partners. You have the seat of Satara, where Uday Bhosle of the who used to be with the NCP, very close aide back then of Sharad Pawar, he had won that seat. Now he's jumped ship to the BJP. There is a contention between the BJP and the Ajit Pawar NCP over the Satara seat. There is, of course, the Osmanabad seat, where again Raju Nimbilkar had won this seat. Rajan Nimbilkar had won this seat last time around on an NCP ticket. Again, this is a contentious seat now between the alliance parties. Nashik is a very interesting case because in Nashik, there was a move by some elements within the Mahayuti, the NDA, to try and give this seat to Chhagan Bhujbal. Of course, he's a strongman of Nashik. He's a minister in the current government. To Chhagan Bhujbal to fight from here. But this is a sitting seat of the Shiv Sena. Hemant Godse, who's the sitting MP, he's joined the Shinde Sena. He wants to contest this seat. He's made that amply clear. And the Shinde Sena has in fact gone ahead and said that Hemant Godse will fight from this seat. But there is this whole movement to try and to consolidate the OBC votes to try and give this seat to Chhagan Bhujbal. So that is still a bone of contention. That is still an unfinished business, if you will, within the NDA. Also, the Mumbai South seat, which Milind Deora and before him, his father Murli Deora used to represent all the way back. You go back to George Fernandez in the 70s. It's a very prestigious seat. It is, of course, the plush uptown seat of South Bombay. Arvind Sawant of the Shiv Sena, the Thackeray faction of the Sena, he's a sitting MP. Right now, the contention is whether it should be given to Milind Deora, because Milind Deora just recently was made a Rajya Sabha MP of the Shinde faction of the Shiv Sena. There is a school within the Shinde Sena which feels that he might be a better candidate to take on Arvind Sawant of the Thackeray Sena. Arvind Sawant, of course, has been declared by the Thackeray Sena as the candidate in Mumbai South. Then you have the India Alliance parties, the Maha Vikas Aghadi as they are known. The chief contention, of course, is the Sangli seat. Sangli, of course, our viewers will remember this. Vasantdada Patil, the legendary chief minister, former chief minister of Maharashtra, who's from the Congress party. Sangli is his pocket borough. It's his home yard. The Congress wanted to give this seat to his grandson, Vishal Patil, but the Shiv Sena has gone ahead and already named Chandrahar Patil as their candidate from Sangli. Then you have the Bhiwandi seat, which is in the outskirts of Mumbai. Kapil Mureshwar Patil of the BJP had won this seat. Again, the fight is between the Shiv Sena and the Congress. Shiv Sena has already declared a candidate in the Bhiwandi seat. The Congress wants this seat to go to it. Now, also there is Mumbai South Central, where Anil Desai, very close aide of Uddhav Thackeray, he's already been named as the Shiv Sena candidate. Rahul Chewale, who is the sitting MP, he's joined the Shinde Sena. Rahul Chewale has been given the ticket by the Shinde Sena. The contention between the Congress and the Thackeray Sena is that the Congress wants to give it to Varsha Gaikwad, who used to be a former MLA and a popular person in that part of Mumbai, whereas the Thackeray Sena has already gone ahead and announced that Anil Desai will fight from that seat of South Central. And finally, in the Mumbai Northeast seat, which is a very interesting seat because Gajanan Kirtikar, who's the sitting MP, he's not the sitting MP, that was won by the BJP. Gajanan Kirtikar, who is a strongman from Mumbai Northeast, he does not want to take on his own son. His son, I believe, is the candidate that's been announced by the India Alliance. Mr. Kirtikar is the candidate that's been announced by the NDA Alliance. So it's a father and son fight that's happening in Mumbai Northeast. There's also the Northwest seat, which is a bit of a bone of contention now. Sanjay Nirupam saying that Shiv Sena has already declared there. He wants to be the Congress candidate from Northwest. There's also the Govinda factor. Govinda now joining the Shinde Sena. He could get the Northwest seat as far as Mumbai is concerned. So there are about 4 or 5 seats, both in the India Alliance as well as in the NDA Alliance, which are still up in the air, which is still up for grabs for any of these alliance partners, and that's still not been ironed out. So let's quickly take a break here in the program. When we come back on the other side, I'm going to go into a deep dive and explainer about what's happening as far as the Israel-Hamas war is concerned. There are 2 international stories that we'll focus on. One, the rising tensions between Israel and the United States. It's now public. There is public sparring between Netanyahu and Mr. Biden after the UN Security Council vote, where the US abstained. That resolution basically called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Also, on the Russia-Ukraine front, Putin has now launched a major drone offensive against Ukraine, even as both sides are targeting each other's energy infrastructure. Both those deep dive stories right on the other side of this quick break.
Presented by we haven't had anything like this happen in Baltimore. All of a sudden you're like, I saw it on the internet. I'm like, oh my God, a bridge collapsed somewhere. And then I'm 10 seconds in, oh my God, it happened here. So immediately you start transitioning the effects of this. And it turns into, we know that the maritime transportation is going to be cut off now, which is a huge part of what we do. We're bringing products in from all over the world, obviously, and we're exporting product to South America, the Far East, Europe as well. We can't ship anything out right now, so the exports have been shut off. So obviously, there's nothing we can load in containers to go out of the country because there's no vessels to load it on. You know, the vessel traffic has stopped. So, and with no incoming containers, you know, that will be shut off as well. So sooner or later, you know, the port's going to just quiet down. It's going to be, I hate to use the word, but almost like a ghost town here, probably within the next few weeks.
If we just have to,
everybody,
get
I mean, we're not the only one who's this.
Okay.
Sorry, I gotta find a way to dig into it.
Yeah, it's just.
With the amount of cargo that comes into this country, you need to understand how, I guess, how fragile this can be. You know, who would ever think this would happen? I mean, this is, you know, everybody's worst nightmare, obviously, in Baltimore, the crazy things that happen. So there's a lot of behind the scenes that happen to get your, you know, your Amazon package to your door, or and a local merchant to get your product. People losing their lives in this terrible accident and the tragedy. You know, hopefully we can locate these people, and my heart goes out to their families and everybody involved. But you know, the next step, you know, as per President Biden, is we need to get the channel back opened up. What that's going to entail, I don't know. We're working with the port daily, and you know, the state, local governments, to see what we can do to get everybody back up and running here. I'm just a small piece of what goes on here.
The Port of Baltimore blockade caused by the catastrophic bridge collapse is unlikely to trigger a new supply chain crisis in the US or spike the prices of goods. That's according to economists and logistics experts. They said that's due to ample and growing spare capacity at competing East Coast ports. Several people were still missing after a container ship collision destroyed the Francis Scott Key Bridge on Tuesday, and it remained unclear how long the wreckage would block the harbour's mouth. However, the rescue search for more survivors was suspended on Tuesday evening, about 18 hours after the incident. Port officials down the East Coast were busy on Tuesday fielding queries from shippers about diverting Baltimore-bound cargo from containers to vehicles. The Port of Virginia is seen as a major beneficiary due to its close proximity to Baltimore, but Georgia Ports Authority said its Savannah and Brunswick ports were also poised to absorb some traffic. The situation is a marked shift from the clogged, understaffed ports and supply chain chaos of 2021 and 2022 that spiked prices and fueled inflation as Americans binged on imported goods purchases coming out of the global health crisis. East Coast ports have invested billions of dollars over the past decade to expand capacity. While the temporary closure at Baltimore may add time and cost for some companies, economists don't expect a significant macroeconomic impact.
The result of the voting is as follows: 14 votes in favor, 0 vote against, 1 abstention. 2022.
The United Nations Security Council on Monday passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The move breaks a 5-month-long impasse during which the United States vetoed at least 3 previous attempts to try and call for a halt to the fighting. The resolution passed with 14 votes in favor and the US abstaining. US officials say they abstained in part because the resolution did not condemn Hamas for the October 7th attack. In addition to a ceasefire, the resolution also called for the immediate and unconditional release of all the hostages. It also called for the lifting of all barriers to the provision of humanitarian assistance in the Gaza Strip. The international community is hoping that Israel will respect the remaining 2 weeks of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and put a halt to the fighting. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, though, immediately criticized the United States for allowing the resolution to pass. He also ordered a delegation that was scheduled to go to Washington to hold high-level talks with US officials to stay intact in Israel. President Biden had requested these meetings to try and discuss alternatives to what is a planned Israeli offensive into Rafah. Rafah is the southernmost city in Gaza, where more than 1 million people have sought refuge in the last few weeks. American officials have said that such an operation into Rafah would create a humanitarian disaster. Netanyahu's office called the US abstention at the UN Security Council a clear departure from the consistent American position in the Security Council since the beginning of this war. Israel also says it harms both the effort of the war as well as the effort to release all the hostages. Yoav Gallant, who's the Israeli defense minister, who's already in Washington for meetings with top Biden administration officials, gave no visible sign that Israel would actually implement a ceasefire, that it would actually obey the resolution that was passed by the UN Security Council. In fact, Mr. Gallant met with Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. He was due to meet with both Vice President Kamala Harris and the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. This is what Yoav Gallant said, and I quote, "We will operate against Hamas everywhere, including in places where we have not been yet." He also went on to say that Israel has no moral right to stop this war while there are still hostages being held in Gaza.
It does not represent a change at all in our policy. It's very consistent with everything that we've been saying we want to get done here. And we get to decide what our policy is. The Prime Minister's office seems to be indicating through public statements that we somehow changed here. We haven't.
The White House sought to play down the growing rift with Israel. John Kirby, who's a spokesman for the National Security Council, insisted that there was no change of US policy despite the UN vote abstention. He also went on to say that the US was perplexed by the decision of the Netanyahu government to hold back from sending an Israeli delegation to Washington. The US side was hoping to have an opportunity to speak to the delegation and to try and explore with them any viable options or alternatives to a major ground offensive in Rafah. Inside the Security Council, the passage of the resolution was greeted with wide applause. The resolution, which was put forth by 10 non-permanent members of the Council, was being negotiated intensely until the very last minute. The United States repeatedly asked for revisions in the text, only for it to eventually abstain from the vote. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, who was in the Middle East meeting with Arab leaders, said in a post on social media that this resolution must be implemented. Failure to do so would be unforgivable. In recent years, the United States has rarely ever broken with Israel in the Security Council. Back in 2009, in the final days of another war, which happened during the George W. Bush presidency, the United States abstained on a ceasefire resolution. This was again a war between Israel and Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. And then under President Barack Obama, it abstained on the 2016 resolution on Israeli settlements. It also abstained on a resolution 3 months ago on humanitarian aid that was meant for Gaza. Now, the crucial variable this time around is that the Biden administration is obviously not happy with Israel's military posture right now. By allowing this resolution to pass, it was one relatively soft way to signal the Biden administration's concerns to Netanyahu, that the US will back Israel only this far and not any further, that there are limits to even America's bipartisan and unqualified support for Israel, which predates this war and is likely to continue even beyond this war. The abstention is a coded hint to Netanyahu to rein in the war effort, over and above all to try and rein in the military operation or the potential military operation into Rafah. Since this war began, the United States had vetoed 3 previous resolutions which called for a ceasefire. It agreed with Israel's position that Israel had a right to defend itself. The American contention was that also a permanent ceasefire would actually benefit Hamas, and that such a resolution could jeopardize diplomatic talks which are being brokered by Egypt and Qatar. Those vetoes infuriated many diplomats as well as UN officials, even as the civilian death toll in this war kept climbing. It also ended up creating a deep rift, even with staunch US allies in Europe, including the likes of France and Britain. Russia and China then last week vetoed 2 alternative resolutions that were put forth by the United States. The most recent one happened last Friday because, according to Russia and China, those proposals did not clearly demand a ceasefire. The United States has been sharply criticized by many leaders for failing to persuade Israel, its closest ally, to stop or to even scale down its bombing and ground campaign in Gaza. Health officials in Gaza say that about 32,000 people have been killed there and more than 2 million displaced and reduced much of the strip to ruins. Israel launched the war after a Hamas-led attack on October 7th, which killed over 1,200 people, mostly civilians in Israel. Hamas also took over 250 hostages into Gaza. Israeli leaders continue to insist that their aim in this war, including the defeat of Hamas, has yet to be fully realized, meaning they cannot go for a permanent ceasefire until Hamas is completely decimated. Security Council resolutions are considered to be binding in international law. And while the Security Council has no means of enforcing its resolutions, it could impose punitive measures, like sanctions, for example, on Israel. But it has to come to a determination of Israel's errant behavior, and of course there has to be consensus among all members, and most notably, America, one of the P5 members, should not veto such sanctions. Will America continue to back Israel then, if the sanctions were to be imposed? Or are they hoping that their errant ally, Netanyahu, will rein his troops in? The next few weeks could very well shape which way and which turn this war takes. As of now, it has been a rupture in what has been a traditional alliance between Israel and the United States, particularly at the UN, where Israel time and time again has been bailed out by the United States, its closest friend and partner, by virtue of it being a permanent member with veto powers. But that is not a right or a freedom that can be taken for granted. That's the signal being sent by the Biden administration. In this past week of March, a massive Russian missile and drone attack killed at least 5 people and wounded several more in Ukraine. The strikes also caused the worst electricity blackout in several months across several Ukrainian cities. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has said that the Kremlin had fired more than 60 drones and almost 90 missiles. 8 of these missiles significantly damaged Ukraine's largest hydroelectric plant in Dnipro, briefly snapping power to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. The largest nuclear power plant has been occupied by Moscow's forces since 2022. Moscow said the aerial assault was retaliation for the deadly Ukrainian strikes on Russian border regions like Belgorod and Kursk and the attacks on its energy infrastructure.
Це наймасштабніша атака на енергосистему взагалі за весь період великої агресії. І вони використали більше ніж 151 засіб враження. Це міксована атака була і комбінація дронів і ракет. Насправді вони атакували по всій території держави енергооб'єкти, як об'єкти генерації, так і об'єкти передачі електроенергії. І, на жаль, ми маємо відповідні влучання. Тому я так скажу, що це, якщо порівнювати навіть зиму 22-23, коли взагалі були масштабні щоденні атаки, то тоді вони максимально використовували десь близько 100 засобів ураження одночасно під час масованих таких хвиль. Тобто, тому це перший раз така масована атака. І мета, безумовно, був блекаут держави повністю.
From the 16th of March till the 22nd, in response to the shelling of Russia's territory and attempts to seize Russian border settlements, the Russian military claimed to have carried out at least 49 retaliatory strikes. The defense ministry in Russia put out a statement claiming to this effect. It is said that these strikes had targeted Ukraine's energy sector, its military-industrial complex, railway hubs, and places where Ukrainian troops and foreign mercenaries are stationed. Ukraine has carried out at least a dozen attacks on major Russian oil refineries since 2022, and that includes at least 9 this year alone. Kiev has also targeted several Russian oil terminals, depots, and storage facilities. On Crux Decode, will Ukraine's strikes on Russian energy infrastructure backfire, or will it deny President Putin a key economic resource that is powering his war? And why does the key patron of this war, the United States, want Ukraine to halt these attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure? Volodymyr Zelensky used the latest Russian attack to step up pressure on allies for more military aid. He said, and I quote, "Russian missiles do not have delays, as do aid packages to our country. The Shahid drones have no indecision like some politicians do. It is important to understand the cost of delays and postponed decisions. Vladimir Zelensky said this in a recorded statement after the latest attack by Russia. Ukrohydroenergo, which is the operator of the Dnipro hydropower plant, said that Russians are trying to create a new ecological disaster, cynically hitting the hydroelectric facilities and the dam. That prompted the European Union leaders at a summit this past week to grapple with European financing of weapons for Ukraine. They asked the European Commission to explore all the options for mobilizing funding and report back by June. There are similar delays in Washington, where a $60 billion military aid bill has been held up for months now by political haggling in the US Congress. Republicans have linked any further funding for Ukraine with a border deal which will stop the flow of more illegal immigrants. Patriot systems must protect Kharkiv and Zaporizhia. Air defense is needed to protect people, infrastructure, houses and dams. That was Zelensky imploring his Western partners. The partners know exactly what is needed and they can definitely support this, according to Zelensky, in what seemed like a desperate last-minute appeal to the Western world. Russia also launched its biggest attack on Kiev in weeks on the 21st of March. This even as the US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was visiting the Ukrainian capital to assuage Zelensky's concerns on Western aid not coming through. President Vladimir Putin had warned that he would respond in kind to recent Ukrainian attacks inside Russia.
Конечно, мы можем ответить тем же. Вот тем же можем ответить. И по гражданской инфраструктуре, и по всем другим объектам подобного рода, по которым противник наносит удары. Вот. У нас есть свои взгляды на этот счет и свои планы. Будем идти по тому, что мы наметили.
Putin's warning came as the Ukrainian Defense Contact Group met at Germany's Ramstein Air Base, and Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin vowed that neither Kiev nor the United States will back down.
As President Biden has said, we will not walk away. Now, Putin hoped to isolate Ukraine. Instead, he left himself alone with Iran and North Korea. And that's a far cry from the some 50 nations of goodwill from all around the world who gathered again today. Our allies and partners are here because they understand the stakes.
But despite Austin's bravado, Washington does reportedly want Ukraine to back down, at least when it comes to attacks on Russia's oil facilities. The US has asked Ukraine to halt any further drone strikes on Russia's oil refineries. There's also fear of driving up crude oil prices and provoking retaliation from Moscow. In fact, Moscow attacked Ukraine's energy infrastructure throughout 2023 before Kiev successfully struck several oil depots inside Russia. And that has ended up causing financial damage to the Kremlin. Remember, Moscow still trades in oil and gas despite the international sanctions against it. The repeated warnings from Washington were delivered to senior officials of Ukraine's State Security Service, the SBU, and the Military Intelligence Directorate, known as the GUR. This was according to a report by the UK-based Financial Times newspaper. Both intelligence units have steadily expanded their own drone programs to strike Russian targets on land, sea, and air since the start of the full-scale invasion back in February of 2022. Washington has reportedly grown increasingly frustrated by the brazen Ukrainian drone attacks that have struck Russia's oil refineries, its terminals, depots, and storage facilities across Western Russia. Washington feels that this will significantly hurt Russia's oil production capacity. Russia remains one of the world's most important energy exporters despite the widespread Western sanctions on its oil and gas sector. Oil prices have gone up by about 15% this year alone. They're right now hovering around the $85 a barrel mark. It's pushing up fuel costs in America, even as US President Joe Biden has begun his campaign for re-election. Fuel prices going up in an election year can be detrimental to any incumbent president. Washington is also concerned that if Ukraine keeps hitting Russian energy infrastructure, including many that are hundreds of miles away from the border, then Russia could retaliate by targeting energy infrastructure that's relied upon by the West, including in mainland Europe. This includes the CPC pipeline, which carries oil from Kazakhstan through Russia into the global markets. Western companies, including the likes of ExxonMobil and Chevron, use this pipeline. Moscow briefly shut down this pipeline in 2022, and the result of that was increased oil prices globally. But Ola Stefanshnaya, who's Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, signaled that Kiev was in no mood to pay heed to the Biden administration's appeals to stop the attacks on Russian refineries.
Російська сторона відповіла, я думаю, якраз досягненням своїх цілей і дуже успішними операціями, проведеними на території Російської Федерації. Також є заяви інших офіційних осіб, які полягають в тому, що це є абсолютно законні цілі з військової точки зору. Це перше. Друге, ми розуміємо заклик американських партнерів. Водночас ми воюємо тими спроможностями, тими ресурсами і тими практиками, які наявні у нас сьогодні. І я хочу нагадати колегам, які такі заяви роблять і публікують Financial Times, коли в лютому 2022 року я говорила з...
While Ukraine clearly rebuffed its primary Western ally and its call to de-escalate these attacks on Russian refineries, it'll be interesting to see how Russia responds to this, both on the battlefield as also, indeed, in how it wants the narrative to shape up on this issue. And whether Washington will be able to rein in Kiev, linking its behavior potentially to the passing of the stuck military aid bill through the US Congress, that remains to be seen. The last spring was about the famous Ukrainian counteroffensive, which turned out to be a dud. This spring could be a turning point in this war, which is now well in its third year. And because it involves oil and gas infrastructure, this will have ramifications far beyond the battlefield itself. This could potentially affect ordinary citizens of the world, including in the developed and in the developing world, by pushing up energy prices in a significant way.
We haven't had anything like this happen in Baltimore.
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Guess who's visiting India? The foreign minister of Ukraine, the one who tried to troll India for buying Russian oil. Now he's calling India a partner and friend. What explains this U-turn? What does he want from New Delhi, and more importantly, will he get it? We'll discuss that. Meanwhile, the tech world is engaged in a new war over artificial intelligence. Big tech is pouring billions of dollars to acquire companies. We'll bring you the numbers and the trends. Also looking at China's moves in South Asia, they're working on Sri Lanka, the Maldives,